Hype was a 1996 released music documentary about the Seattle grunge scene, directed by Doug Prey.
Yeah, it kind of charts the rise of the scene, that started in the 80s and, obviously continued into the 90s and then hit, was a global phenomenon once Nirvana hit the scene in 91 with Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it kind of charts, the origins of it, why that particular sound, was so popular and also the involvement that the Sub Pop label had with it. And it's got interviews with some of the big bands around at the time. It's got a couple of guys from Soundgarden on there, Mudhoney, Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, and some of the lesser known bands like Gas Huffer and Mono Men and 7 Year Bitch,
Tad,
and the
Melvins,
and Screaming Trees, and lots of others. Some of were more well known around that time than others. Some of them went global, like Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and others. Whereas others, if you weren't if you weren't really into that scene, you might not have heard of them. So yeah, and it kind of charts the phenomenon that it became. With flannel shirts being widely available everywhere, around the world. It just became a massive thing for the youth of the time, including us, I think.
Over here, yeah. Definitely.
And how the bands felt about that. Obviously, the documentary was made in '96, a couple of years after Kurt Cobain passed away. So yeah, there's interviews with band members. There's Jack Endino, one of the big producers around at the time, and the Sub Pop guys as well, who created the Sub Pop label, and some journalists as well that covered the scene at the time, and some quite rare performances from some of the bands. Like there's an early performance of Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana, and there's a Soundgarden in there, and some of the other stuff.
Yeah, no, I think there's some really good performances, and I mean, just take you up on the two some of the interviews. Two that I really took up on was Charles Peterson, who's a photographer at the time, and he took many of the photographs you might know of that era. Kurt Cobain, the famous one of him on his back. He's a really interesting photographer. He's got a nice site which has got some. You can see a lot of his photographs he took and other things he's done over the time. There's also Art Chantry, graphic designer, and he did a lot of posters of that time. Yeah. And it's great because the documentary is full of it's really nicely cut together. There's lots of good imagery, and also some of this is cinematography of Seattle. Yeah, it's quite cool as well. I mean, it's a really well put together documentary.
Definitely.
There's all kinds of people. They speak to fans. And they speak to, producers, engineers, journalists. Dawn Anderson, who was the editor of Backlash magazine, which I think was like a fanzine, because obviously that's an era where lots of fanzines were around. She said some quite interesting things. In fact, I think she said the interesting thing where they said they were kind of getting tired of the whole scene. And there's a nice cut where she basically says, it was the end of the whole scene and they were getting ready to maybe move on. And then, bang, Nirvana exploded. And suddenly the whole thing went global. Yeah, so it is obviously a music documentary, but it's more than that. It's not just a music documentary. I think you can come to this, watching the whole grunge scene, but it's also about the whole success and what that can do. And I think the end of the documentary, before they start talking about the explosion of Nirvana, they kind of talk about the culture and, there's a great quote, money changes everything. And so it's not just about the actual scene from Seattle, it's about the whole, over-saturated popularization of a scene of music, which a lot of music scenes, punk went through it.
Yeah, so, even if you're not into that music or you're not really aware of any of those bands, it's, you'll get something out of it anyway. And you never know, you might find some bands that you actually want to look up and check out.
Right.
You might watch a documentary, you think, oh, that sounds quite interesting. Or biopics, for example. You think, I don't really know anything about this person. It'll make you find out, even after the film, you'll go and find out more about them. I was never particularly into Johnny Cash before I watched Walk the Line, and that film just completely blew me away. I was like, I'm going to go and check out some of his music. So maybe Hype would do that
Yeah,
some of you.
definitely. Yeah, I mean,
This
you
is
might,
some
you
great-
might, you may be a fan of the top dogs like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, but maybe you haven't heard of 7 Year Bitch or the Gits or Gas Huffer
Or Fastbacks.
lots
Or,
of bands that are mentioned in there, and you can go and check out those guys as
and
well.
when this documentary was made, you couldn't just stick on Spotify and
No,
look
you
them
couldn't.
up, or
No,
YouTube
nowadays
or whatever.
it's
But
very-
now, it's easy to find.
We had to rely
These-
heavily on magazines
Yeah.
and each other.
Yes.
That's
exactly.
pretty much how we got into stuff.
And watching things like Noisy Mothers.
Noisy
late at
Mothers. Yeah. That was a good show.
night. It was awesome.
Yeah. And Beavis and Butthead, of course.
People's Butthead.
That was another way of tracking down bands you hadn't seen. But even then, we couldn't just go out and jump onto Spotify. We had to
No, you had to go and
we had
go
to
to
earn
HMV
some
or
money
something,
and go and buy this stuff.
That's if
So
they
much
even sold
easier.
it. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to probably go to an independent record shop,
Or
which
ask,
barely exists anymore. But
or ask the older woman behind the counter at Woolworths some random name.
yes, do you have anything by the Gits,
Yeah.
my dear lady?
So you don't need to do that now. Watch this documentary and then jump on Spotify.
Yeah.
And all your...
Dreams will come true.
Exactly.
So you might be watching this wondering what the hell grunge is, or was.
You might. That's true. We can tell you.
Yeah,
We can. What is grunge?
it was.
A name.
I don't know. I don't think it was. Who came up with the? Does it say
Well,
in the documentary where that came from?
It doesn't.
I can't
No,
remember.
it doesn't at all. But again, it's similar to punk, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it's a brand name to give something, because I don't think grunge personally is a form of music, because it all came from, similarly with punk. I mean, punk was a word that was started, used in the 50s and 60s for a kid, an unruly child. And then of course these musicians came along and someone gave it this term punk. And I think similarly with grunge. I mean, I don't think grunge, the title, existed before bands like Nirvana.
No,
came
I
along
don't
at
think
all.
so. I think a
grunge-
journalist just used that word
He
in
must
an
have used
article, and
that.
then that stuck. But I think it's kind of.
I mean, grunge itself, the music is kind of is a mixture of hardcore bands, punk bands, metal bands that were coming out. There was obviously that rebellious nature against heavy metal, the hair bands that were coming out of the 80s. Bon Jovi.
I think it was a reaction to sort of the 80s,
Definitely,
sort of Reagan's, excesses, and hair bands like Bon Jovi and Poison and
Twisted Sister.
things like that. People had
Motley
enough of
Crue.
those.
Yes, and also I think if you look at the documentary obviously talks about Seattle being, a very wet place, raining all the time.
Bit miserable.
Serial killer capital of the world, apparently. The Mansons holidayed up there.
Yes, apparently so.
When there's not, when it's raining all the time, a bit like Britain, there's not much to do. You just sit in your room and listen to music. Or you play music, or you create music, or you just create in general. And I think, with any type of music or art, that's where these things come from, and then obviously people pick up on them and they have to give them titles because that's what they have to do.
You have to compartmentalise everything. don't you?
Exactly. So yeah, it was directed by Doug Prey. He is a documentary filmmaker. After this one, he did a film called Scratch. I don't know if you've seen that, which is really interesting, about the kind of hip hop turntablism sound.
Yeah.
That was a really good documentary. And then there's not many more famous ones after that. He did Surfwise, which is about surfing. And then Art and Copy, which is about the advertising industry, which is quite an interesting one. So he's still working and he's still making documentaries. But I think this was his first one. Although it's a really good first one. I think it's really well done. So yeah, as we said, it is quite an old. It's 1996. Can you still see it? Can you see it?
You can. I mean, it was available on DVD for a while, I think, in the States. I don't think it's ever been released in the UK.
Probably not. No.
I mean, it might have been shown on TV at some point years ago, but no, it's just been released on Blu Ray by Shout Factory, a nice special edition, all cleaned up with some nice extra features. There's a commentary by the director, and there's some extra interviews and performances that weren't in the original cut. And there's also a 20 years later featurette that's not particularly long, but it features some of the people that were originally interviewed for the documentary, just their thoughts on it, and how the scene has changed, what happened after it, because grunge was kind of still, it was starting to still going on a little bit when it came out. So yeah, and it was filmed shortly after Chris Cornell passed away. So
Oh, okay. Because I hadn't seen those special features yet, and I was interested because obviously, I watched Hype like 15 years ago, and then I watched it a few months ago, and then I watched it last night because we were doing this. And obviously, since then, Chris Cornell has passed away, so it's quite sad rewatching it and knowing that. Although Chris Cornell's not actually on Hype, Matt Cameron and Kim Thiel are on the actual documentary, and Chris Cornell is not. But even so, it's kind of it's quite sad watching that now, knowing that he's not with us anymore.
So yeah, if you do want to check it out, obviously this is from the US. It is a Region A, so if you're in the UK or anything that isn't Region A, if you don't have a multi-region player, you're not going to be able to play it. But it's definitely worth finding if you can. I think it was released in Germany a few years ago on Blu Ray as well, so that'll be Region B friendly, I would assume. So yeah, it's not too hard to track down if you really want it.
No, and do, because it's good.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
If you're into that music and you haven't seen it, watch it, because it's really, really good documentary. So that was Hype, and if you enjoyed this video, then give us a thumbs up or subscribe, any of that crazy stuff that you can do on YouTube.
Or give us a comment if you're a fan of grunge and flannel shirts and cool music. Like we are. Leave us a comment. And check us out on Twitter and Facebook. We're on there. And there'll be links to some other of our videos coming up.
Yeah.
So check those out.
Do.
And subscribe. You've already said that.
I said that.
But
do it again.
Do it again.
Do it twice.
Make sure you click the little thing so you get notifications and all that.
Oh, indeed.
Magical stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week for another one.